Same God is the story of Dr. Larisha Hawkins, who is an African-American political science professor who was the first Black tenured female professor at Wheaton College, which is an evangelical school outside of Chicago. She was the first woman in the school's 156-year history, first Black woman to have tenure. In December 2015, the rhetoric towards Muslims was becoming very negative with the presidential primaries, and Dr. Hawkins, as an embodiment of her Christian faith, decided to wear a hijab in solidarity with Muslim women during Advent, which is Christmas. And she took a selfie, she posted it on Facebook, and gave an explanation of why she was doing this. In that explanation, she quoted Pope Francis, who a week before said that Muslims and Christians worship the same God, meaning that they are Abrahamic religions. And that comment that they worship the same God set off a global controversy that lasted for several months. And I started filming with Dr. Hawkins in the middle of that controversy and continued to follow her for the next couple of years to track how this impacted her life.
So what brought you to the story? What attracted you to this story?
Well, first of all, I am an alumna of Wheaton College, and so I was following the story closely because it was, this huge controversy, and my school was in the middle of it. But really what I was fascinated by was the polarization within the evangelical community. On one side, you had people that felt like what she did was very sort of Jesus-y, for lack of a better word, right? And on the other side, you had people who felt like she was really a heretic for what she had done and deserved to be kicked out. So I really wanted to explore that inability to see eye to eye on this.
So what was your first conversations with her like? I mean, filmmaker coming to her to put cameras in front of her face must have been, kind of shocking to her, but, she's used to publicity by now. So what was those conversations like, and how did you convince her to allow you to follow her around for a while?
I reached out to her. I did not know her, and I didn't know anyone who knew her. I sent her a cold email. She was in the midst of so much controversy, she couldn't check her email. There was too much going on. So she had an old college friend who was checking it for her. And that friend said, send me some samples of your work. So I did. And the friend said to Dr. Hawkins, I think you'll like her work. I think you should do this. So we set up our first interview, which was in Houston, and I'm based in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So I drove there. It was about 4 hours. And at that point, I had never even talked to her. And I remember driving there and thinking, what am I going to do if she's crazy when I get there? What's going to happen with my story? But when I met her, within the first 10 minutes, it was very obvious to me what a lovely person she is in every way. And when we sat down for that first interview, I just was really struck by her earnestness. She's a very open, authentic person. And from the get-go, she just opened up with me. I think we really connected. The very first interview was 4 hours long, and we still didn't get through all the content. And then as I continued to film with her for the next couple years, obviously we, just got to know each other much better. And she continues to be very raw in the documentary, which is one thing that I think people really appreciate about the film.
So what was it like interviewing the people who were opposed, or did you guys get to, interview some of her students or some activists that were like, hey, we don't agree, what was she doing? And what was that like?
I really struggled to get people who disagreed with her to go on camera. I tried several.
Was it because of fear of retaliation, or?
I think that's part of it, yes. I mean, she lost her tenure position at the school, and so there were a lot of faculty who were reluctant to go on camera because it was kind of dangerous, right?
Right.
The school administration, I tried for several years to get them to participate in the film. They declined. And
even though you're an alumni?
Yes. Yeah. And I really tried. I mean, we had conversations about it. It was not just a token request, but, I basically said I'm willing to whatever you can say, I want to work with. I want to include your voice in this. So the story really is more her story and her perspective. But as a filmmaker, I came to realize that was kind of a good thing, because the narrative about her that was in the public eye was so untrue. She had really been painted as somebody who's not a Christian. I mean, some people think she's Muslim to this day. They ask me that. And so I feel like giving her a chance to just share her story and who she is. I actually go to Oklahoma City, which is where she was born and her family is, and we meet her family. I think when you see that and you see her in that context, you have such a better idea of why she did this and what was motivating her. It's okay that it's more from her perspective than anyone else's.
Do you find that, I find personally that film can help bridge people together, and I think that's what you're trying to do with this film, is to bridge several groups together, because I feel like that if, people see other people's viewpoints, how they live, how they eat, how they dress, that hate kind of goes away, because hate is fueled by fear. And are you seeing this with this film as you're taking around on the festival circuit, that is opening up people's minds and people walk out of the theater with great questions, but also to a different mindset that they had before entering the theater?
Absolutely. I've seen two things happen. One is they understand her in a way that they didn't. I've had people tell me that they did a 180 on who she was after seeing the film. And I think it's because she was so grossly misunderstood and mischaracterized in the media when this happened. But the second thing that is sort of the bigger picture, there's a dialogue happening between Muslims and Christians as a result of the film that I think is really beautiful and really, really necessary right now, with all the violence that's taking place that is religiously based. You have Muslim terrorists, you have Christian terrorists, you
even have Jewish terrorists, which people don't realize that there are Jewish terrorists out there.
Yes, and so I think that any story, any attempt to say, hey, what do we have in common? What can we focus on that unites us? And not wiping away differences, not saying there aren't differences in our beliefs and in who we are, but there's a shared humanity that we can focus on. I see people really inspired to do that after seeing the film, and that's really exciting.
If you don't mind me getting personal, if you don't want to answer this, that's okay. How did this impact your faith personally, knowing her story and knowing what she's doing? How did this impact you, or what surprised you about doing this, that surprised you about yourself, that you didn't know about yourself?
That's interesting. Let me think about that for a minute. I think it's probably easier to talk about the faith question. I think as somebody who grew up in a Christian tradition and who identifies as a Christian, it really helped me really dig deep into what I believe and why I believe it, and work through a lot of the hatred that you see propagated in the name of Christianity in our world right now. It's not that I didn't know that that's not what I identified with. I mean, that wasn't a surprise, but when you have to defend to people why you're doing the story and explain why you're doing the film, and I did. I mean, I had my own family members who were not happy that I was telling this story. I had to really dig into my heart and figure out, why do I think this is important? Why am I doing this? So it's safe to say you grew in your own faith and you grew as a person as you were making this documentary. I did. And I grew in my understanding. A lot of the film, really at the root of it, there's a real exploration of systemic racism and how we are often blind to our own biases against people. And I grew personally. Like, I learned things. There were interviews that I did where people would say something and it was like, oh wow, you just completely, that just opened a door to my understanding to some of these issues that I never would have known if I hadn't done this film. And so that was if there's any encouragement I have for people, like, I am evolving as a person, I evolved as a filmmaker, and I hope that the audience will be willing to sort of grow themselves and kind of grow with me in the things that I learned.
Speaking of growing in the audience, what has been some of the, I wouldn't say shocking, but, surprising things that have come out of your Q&As as you're traveling down the festival circuit? What has really stuck with you?
I think that people very frequently want to know how this has impacted my faith. I'm very aware that there are a lot of people in my audience that have been wounded by their faith backgrounds, whatever they are. And I think that they feel some solidarity and kind of a sense of relief that someone is addressing these issues. And is trying to tackle them in a way that's not angry or necessarily divisive, but just like, hey, let's talk about these things. I find that people express to me frequently that they feel relieved, when they see the film. It's like, okay, I'm not the only person that feels this way.
So tell us a little bit about your festival circuit trip. I mean, what has it been like? And why did you decide to submit to Bentonville?
Well, I actually was invited to submit to Bentonville, which was
awesome.
a real honor. So my film premiered at the Los Angeles Film Festival in late September. And so Bentonville reached out to me because they had some people on the staff who had seen my film and said, would you be willing to submit it? We'd like to consider it. Which was a real honor, right?
It is
that
a
they
real
felt
honor,
like,
yeah.
that they felt like it deserved another showing. And I was thrilled that they, ultimately came back and said, we'd like to include this. So far, this has been just a wonderful experience. I mean, I really appreciate the director's retreat that they had initially. Like, I feel a sense of community with the directors here that I haven't experienced at the other festivals. And it just makes it feel more personal. Like, I feel like it's more of a personal growing experience instead of just showing up and showing your film.
What about the retreat really stood out to you?
I think the personal relationships, but beyond that, I really appreciated that they made an effort to have speakers and presenters who focused on distribution and helping you get your film out there. We're all scrappy little filmmakers and playing a lot of different roles and wearing a lot of different hats, and it really felt like genuine support. Like, hey, we want to help you make your film a success, and that just is awesome.
So what's next for the film? We're here in Bentonville right now. What's next for the film?
We are really focused on community screenings and have had quite a few across the country. There are a couple more tours that may be coming up. But I'm working on getting some national distribution, so it's a work in progress, and I really am hoping to have some sort of theatrical release later this year, though the details of that are still being worked out.
That's awesome. So what's next for you personally as a filmmaker? You kind of at the end of this project, what's some future projects that you're working on, if you could talk about anything?
I have quite a few in the hopper. I have a screenplay that I'm working on. I'm trying to sort of take some risk and move more into the narrative realm, which I'm not quite as comfortable with as I am with documentary. And I have another documentary that should be coming out next year. I'm not the director of that. I'm the producer of it. And it's about this guy who is a faith healer and has kind of done some crazy things. So I've got some interesting things in the hopper.
That's awesome. And lastly, talked about community screenings that you'll love to do, to take it to any places of worship that's welcome to it. So where can they find out about the film and reach out to you for community screenings? Okay,
so our website is www.samegodfilm.com. And on that page, we have a screenings page that we try to keep updated. Same God Film is our handle for Facebook, for Twitter, and for Instagram. And probably Facebook is what I'm the best at updating. As soon as I know about a screening, that's where I announce it first. So I would really recommend people start there and then and kind of follow accordingly on everything else.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for taking time out to talk to us today.
Thank you. I've enjoyed this.